Representative Dana Bumgardner was my roommate here in Raleigh, and it's a very tough speech to give about his passing. I was actually on my way to visit him on Saturday before he passed away and didn't make it in time. Whenever we do the memorial for him, I'll share some more funny stories because honestly, I've got to filter my Dana stories to make sure that they're PG. And, you know, with Dana, anytime he said, well, you knew something was getting ready to happen. And there's a lot of stories I could tell about Dana. He loved this state. He loved Gaston County. He was very committed to the people there. He always used to tell me that he knocked on 5,000 doors to get down here. And he was right. He outworked all of his opponents every time he had an election. And he loved art. I mean, he was a very cultured man, believe it or not. And that gruff exterior that he had, he loved art. He loved culture. He loved food. He loved traveling. He was a wine connoisseur. He had 500 bottles of wine at his house. I mean, that was his hobby, was collecting wines and collecting the best wines. And every week, Dana would bring several bottles of wine to the apartment, and those were the best wines I've ever had in my life. And he loved wine. More importantly, he loved his family. He loved Cindy, his wife, his daughter Lauren, his son Austin, and more important than any of them, he loved his grandchildren. And it's going to be sad not being with him. This Saturday in Gastonia from 10 to 11:45 will be his visitation. And then at 12 o'clock, John Sauls will actually be officiating his funeral. And I know that was Dana's wishes for John to do that. John and Dana and I actually traveled to the Grand Canyon together. And so I'll cherish that memory forever. But just keep his wife and his kids and grandkids in your prayers during this very difficult time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So I guess a lot has been said about Representative Bumgardner, and there are a few things that I wanted to mention about Dana and his family. One, his wife Cindy continued to keep us updated as Dana progressed and then got worse. And a lot of the people around the community took food to Dana's family, and he was so appreciative. There were a couple of things that I wanted to mention about Dana just quickly. One is he was so proud that within the last year, he started self-defense classes. And every so often, Dana would come up to me and show me a new move, and that was pretty interesting. But he really enjoyed getting into self-defense. That's one thing that he talked about a lot in his final days. The other thing that I have to mention about Dana, other than being a family man, a Christian, a great father, brother, he's got a lot of family in Gaston County. He always mentioned to me that he had family buried in Kaiser, North Carolina, which is in Upper Cleveland County. And he was very proud of that. And of course, he grew up in the Bessemer City area, which is also in the district I represent. And then the final thing I wanted to say about Dana is how astute and intelligent he was. He was an avid reader, as you well know. I mean, he could tell you things about history that I certainly couldn't express to anybody. And there was one other thing about Dana that you need to know. He became, although he didn't really serve as a chair of the committee, but he became an expert at transportation. And after we moved out of the old equity formula and into the new law, STI, Dana got into the weeds with us. He knew exactly how to get a project prioritized. He knew what would happen if a project didn't score well and cascaded to a lower level. He knew about the prioritization points that the division engineer could grant, or the RPO or the MPO. He became an expert at transportation. And one of the last texts I got from Dana, believe it or not, within the last 2 weeks, had to do with transportation. There was a major decision about a project on a fiscally constrained list, and actually it was over in Charlotte, and Dana texted about that. He knew what was going on with a physically constrained project on a list in Charlotte within the last 2 weeks of his last breath. And that told me a lot about him. And then the final thing I'll say is Cindy called and said, Kelly, if you're going to come see Dana, you probably need to come pretty quickly. We're calling in hospice. I think that was on a Saturday, Kyle, if I'm not mistaken. And so, you know, my wife and I got in the car. We went down there. Anika didn't go in because, you know, COVID and other things. We just felt better. And so I'll just go ahead and be honest with everybody. I'm 60 years old, but that's the first time that I experienced someone very close to their last breath. And I didn't know it. I thought it was medicine-induced stupor. But come to find out it wasn't. And Dana, I'll be vivid for you. When Cindy would mention that someone was beside him, he would use every ounce of energy he had to open an eye. And if you spoke to him, and I think Pastor Saul's told me this, hearing is one of the last things to go. If you spoke to him, he would try to mumble back to you. And boy, that brought tears to my eyes when I saw Dana do that. So I won't go on anymore other than to say it'll be an honor to pay tribute to him on Saturday. And it's an honor and privilege to be able to be in this body and take personal privilege to speak about such an honorable man. And thank you.
Dana Bumgardner is a good man. I offer that as encouragement for all of us. And I understand when we speak about our loved ones and we use the past tense. Dana was. I've made it a practice to say Dana is, so-and-so is. Because yes, death is a transition. A wise man made this statement that I refer to often, that in the gospel of Jesus Christ, death is a comma, not a period. Therefore, I say, Dana Bumgardner is a good man.
Obviously echo a lot of the sentiments that we've already heard about Representative Bumgardner. I would just felt compelled to say something just because when I first got here, those of you that were here, you don't remember a lot of times, John and Hardison and I were talking about this the other day, I actually got appointed midterm. And so I came in and we'd already finished the long session, and so the short session was getting started up. And so the first person I met, first Republican person I met was Mike Hager. Met him down in the cafeteria, and that was an interesting, fun time. Mike is really funny for those that remember Mike. And then the second person that I actually got a chance to talk to was a speaker. The speaker and I were over at the Capitol building. And he came up, and I was so out of politics, I didn't even realize he was still here, but we were in college together, and we share a very close friend. But the third person was Dana. And Dana was in transportation. And I think that's why it was so good you brought that up, Representative Hastings. And so for 8 years, Dana has been my constant in the sense of I always see him under the building in the garage. And out of everybody here, all of us that we've taught and things, never talked to Dana about a bill. It was just always something funny. And I would love to be able to recount it now. I can't, but I mean, it's just every time I saw Dana when we were outside this building, I just smiled because he always had something, because Dana was his own person. And that's what I loved about him. It didn't matter who was telling him what he needed to do voting, who was telling him what he needed to do on a bill or something. He literally made up in his mind who and what he was going to be about what he was doing and just kept on going. And was never unpleasant. Was never, well, okay, I wasn't in caucus. I'm going to assume I'm right. But it was just always, he was never unpleasant, never cantankerous. He just had an opinion and immediately jumped off that opinion and would start talking to you about his family or something else. And that was just who he was. And that's why I'm going to miss him, because I think all of us could take something from that, because literally to think for 8 years to serve with somebody and never once talk about anything except each other. That was really nice. And it's nice when you get up here, however briefly, to find somebody that makes you smile and makes you happy. And really, when they ask about how you're doing, sincerely cares how you're doing. And that was Dana. And I'm really going to miss that. He had some really close relationships in our caucus. And it's just, it's really tough when you see this happen. I mean, it's been a tough year all around, but I mean, he just, he was one of those people I just never thought of being in this building, and Dana not being downstairs in the garage, walking to his car and having something funny to tell me. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
As you see, there's a state flag right there draped over Representative Bumgardner's seat. And for those who are here who aren't members, that's not just there for decoration. That's there because Representative Bumgardner passed away after a short but tough fight with cancer a few days ago. And Dana was one of my close friends here, very close with many folks in this house. And he was the kind of guy that didn't see you as Republican or Democrat or anything else. He just saw you as a person. He saw you as a fellow American and somebody who was taking your time to be here to serve your citizens back home. I do think, and I know there'll be others who will speak today on points of personal privilege in honor of Representative Bumgardner. There'll be more formal moments where we formally recognize him and his family in the coming weeks. But it just seemed like an appropriate time with where we are right now to mention that. Number one, that whenever we see a passing, of course, Representative Carter passed away not that long ago now. Now Representative Bumgardner, it puts a lot of this in perspective. And every one of you who are here are taking time away from your families, from folks, from loved ones, from things, to be here. Time that you will never get back. And you're doing it because you love this state, you care about the people of this state, and you want to see what's best. We have bills today, we have bills yet to come where we are going to have differences of opinion, sometimes strong differences of opinion. But I think the recognition that we can all have disagreements without being disagreeable, that we can all have a very strong and fierce debate without making it personal, is something that's well said. And perhaps it's the late year, the fact that we're still here in October. We would have liked to have been out of here by July. And just the workload, but I would encourage my colleagues to keep that in mind and to just, it's real simple, the golden rule: treat everybody else the way you want to be treated. And I would say I generally see that, but sometimes we do have some tempers that flare up. But as a wise man once said, measure twice and cut once on those words. That would be my word. And if I don't say it enough, I want each and every one of you to know that I appreciate you, not only as a representative, but as a person, and thank you for what you do every day to be here for the citizens of North Carolina.